Well, let's bring you more now on this conflict. Of course, as we're hearing, war is intensifying despite calls for peace coming from the likes of the African Union and the United Nations. We are now joined by Samuel Getachew, an independent journalist based in Ethiopia, for some analysis on the conflict. Samuel, of course, this conflict has attracted a lot of interest, both regionally and internationally. There's even been concerns raised from countries in the West, among them the United States. But Samuel, what do you think are the core interests of Western nations in this conflict?
I think it's a good question to ask them, but my observation is there is always American interest that is happening in many countries. But from the perspective of Ethiopia and Ethiopians, there is a very mainstream assumption that the US is really looking for perhaps a government change in Ethiopia. Ethiopians often look at the experiences they had in terms of getting involved in local issues, like in countries like Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, too many to count. And this is where we are. But again, the US, the Biden administration has really been a wedge issue among Ethiopians. There are those that really want the US to get involved. There are many Ethiopians that are saying the US shouldn't get involved. But again, this conflict is a wedge issue among Ethiopians.
Well, of course, at some point, Abiy Ahmed was the darling of the world. In 2019, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. It's fair to say that he has attracted a lot of criticism since. What then, or what is the US's position, do you think, on Abiy Ahmed? Do they still see any possibility or potential of making him an ally of Western nations, or the United States in particular?
I mean, the US has always had this vision they call American interest. And, you know, we've seen them, historical terms, where they switch sides between the opposition and the government in many countries. And I'm sure Ethiopia is no exception. But they did support him at the beginning. They did support him. There were much support coming from, even from the era of Trump, saying that he was the one that will really historical milestones in terms of having issues of famine that really defined Ethiopia in the 1984-85 years. And also endless conflicts and displacement of many people. And every country that wants to come to Ethiopia obviously has its own interest. The European Union wanting to really push the migrants to stay put within their own countries and not come to their soil. The US really wanting to really compete with China, for instance, even Turkey, which has been having more power, nation in the Horn of Africa, a population of more than 110 million people, an economy that was really moving forward. But again, this conflict has really impacted on the ground, including its image around the world.
And you mentioned, Samuel, of course, the risk of foreign intervention, that this could evolve into a situation like Libya. How do we stop that from happening?
Well, you know, there are those people that say that peaceful engagement should be the way to move forward. This is part of the African Union's vision of having African solution to African problems. They've been saying for a long time. The African Union envoy, the former president of Nigeria, Mr. Obasanjo, has been saying there is a window of opportunity to really solve this and end this conflict. Because this conflict has really impacted millions of people. More than 2 million people have been displaced. And it's a conflict that's painfully really defined by sexual exploitation of women. And the allegations are not just one-sided, but they accuse, even the UN report that came out a few weeks ago with the partnership of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission says all actors, all parties were involved. And I hope that's the down payment we need in terms of having more reports come forward, so people could at least know exactly what happened and find a roadmap on how Ethiopia could move forward. But it's been a painful year.
Indeed. And of course, at this point, Samuel, it may be too soon to try and look to the future. But would you say that this conflict has potentially changed the course of Ethiopia's trajectory as far as what is happening and what the future may look like?
Well, I've always said, you wake up, you sleep on one reality, and you wake up on a different reality in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is just moving forward, even for me or for someone who's observing it from here. But the fact is, Ethiopia has to find a way to move forward. It's not just impacting everyday Ethiopians. It's also creating the image that Ethiopia is not stable enough for foreign investment to come to this country. The French, the Turkish citizens are even living today, as of today, because their embassies has said Ethiopia is not safe for you, so you have to leave. So all this will add up at the end of the day in terms of how important is foreign investment. That's how Ethiopia really changed its image in the last few years, moving from an aid dependent nation to a country that was really looking at being self-sufficient instead of being a country that really the world looked down on and sent money as a donation. But again, Ethiopia has to find a way to move forward. And historically, Ethiopia has been an important nation. It played a role in the formation of the African Union. It also helped Nelson Mandela get military training